we have a political pundit, Richard Heydarian, joining us on the show today. Welcome to the program. Welcome back, Richard.
Good morning. I'm not sure if pundit is an upgrade, but I'll take it for this morning.
Sige, lagyan na lang natin ng resident political pundit. Slash analyst, slash vlogger. All right. Okay. Major moves of the president right after the midterms. There were two. One, of course, is that BBM podcast where he made a lot of pronouncements. And the second one is this cabinet revamp. Let's go first to the podcast. What do you make of the posturing towards reconciliation? I mean, to be honest, right after everything that had happened in the past months with the arrest of the former president, with the impeachment and the remarks against the vice president, it kind of surprised me that he took this turn. Signaling or posturing that he needed more friends and not enemies.
Well, I think the two moves are very much related. I think they're part of one single major gesture, which is the president trying to say, okay, I got the message and I'm going to act accordingly or respond accordingly. Perhaps the debate right now is whether that response is proportionate or whether the response is appropriate to begin with. Ang basa ko kasi dito is when it comes to the podcast itself, for instance, the choice of the person who interviewed him, the choice of the range of issues they covered, and also this emphasis that is open to reconciliation to the Dutertes and that, what people are looking for is positive messaging and all. He almost sounded like a candidate during the election. He sounded more like, I don't know, Pamakin or Bongo during the election, right? And my sense is, of course, he's right to think that, the success of top two candidates, whether it's Pamakino or Bongo, is precisely because they focus whether on malasakit issue in the case of Bongo or on education issue in the case of Pamakino. But my thing is that as the president, who was at the receiving end of an underperformance, to put it mildly, I just felt this was not the best way for him to communicate his recognition. I think the way it came out is as if he's saying, okay, we got decimated here. And I think what's happening here is an overcorrection, whereby he's signaling rather than decisive introspection. I think what he's signaling is perhaps weakness. That's how it came off to me, because I felt that is not what you wanted it to come out from the podcast. What you wanted to come out from the podcast is, first of all, to say, I'm not a lame duck. We didn't do as well as we do, but we can do better. And in next years, these are the things I'm going to do to make sure that the Filipino people will appreciate my administration. I just felt that yung mga parang aside lang niya began to really dominate the conversation, because the reconciliation discussion with the Dutertes was, I think, that was something that stood out and was something that the Duterte side and a lot of critics actually carried out of this podcast to say, see, the president is already taking out the white flag. See, the president is almost a lame duck. See, the president is accepting that he suffered a major defeat. And now you have the other side actually, smelling blood. I mean, Senator Bato de la Rosa said that he has to show extreme sincerity. What does that mean? Do they want concessions on the potential ICC warrant of arrest against him? Sara Duterte earlier said that she's open to a bloodbath, meaning she's very confident about how the impeachment is going to go. So I mean, half jokingly, I said maybe as part of the cabinet reshuffle, maybe now he's open to rehiring Sara. Maybe Sara will finally get the part of that she was. I mean, I half jokingly said that, but if he pushes reconciliation argument to its logical conclusion, why not, right? Why not just put some Duterte people in your cabinet and everything will be love, love, love and everything's fine? I just felt that was not the best message that he could have sent at this point. I honestly, the message he should have sent is to say, yes, we didn't do as well in the Senate, but nevertheless, my allies dominated in the Congress. Nevertheless, we won most of the gubernatorial and mayoral position. Nevertheless, we have sufficient number in the Senate to, at the very least, to push for what I believe is the right agenda for the country. And then, of course, yes, he's free to say, I respect separation of powers at wala akong kinalaman sa trial na yan, and just leave it at that. What we see from this president is he keeps on throwing a wet blanket on the Sara impeachment trial issue, which I think is, again, excessive. He should just distance himself, but not throw a wet blanket when some people are worried that what could happen here is that maybe a trial will not happen or that the Mickey Mouse trial may happen. So I just felt overcorrection is happening here rather than a proper response introspection.
Oh, do you think he realized that the Duterte base was too valuable to lose? I mean, with the 2028 in sight and him not having a successor, a strong successor at the moment, is this him trying to regain that base for political alliances heading into his last 3 years? Or is this his personality just showing that he is just too nice, as discussed in that podcast na sinasabi nga na there is that perception that he may be too nice, and he said that he wants to be respected, but maybe fear is better. Which of the two do you think it is?
Well, I mean, we can talk about Machiavelli for the next hour and have a lecture on Machiavelli, that sometimes you need to be a fox and sometimes you need to be a lion. That's absolutely correct. I mean, I think as far as President Marcos Jr. is concerned, I think he has to accept that one of the reasons they didn't do very well during election is precisely because there was a lack of effective response to two major criticism from two different camps. The first one was yung criticism galing sa mga liberals and progressives ukol dun sa issue ng ayuda, PhilHealth, and supposed questionable practices in the budget ahead of the election period, basically weaponizing the budget to serve the Alianza campaign. I never heard really a decisive and convincing response on that front. So they were already pinned down on that front. And then the ICC issue happened, and then what we saw was there was no follow-through. There was no convincing narrative by Marcos or his deputies to really to say that this was a legitimate move, this was in the national interest. No, they just wanted to shove it below the rug and hope that the machinery of the state and everything will carry the day, and that the buduts and the names and all of that will be enough. Well, guess what? It was not enough. So I think that should be more of the introspection, that there was not a significant effort to deal with those major criticisms from both camps. And guess what? Those two camps did well. Number one went Bongo, number two went but almost number two, and then number two was, of course, Pam, and number five was Kiko Pangilinan. Only one from Alianza was in top five. So that means there was not effective response to that. The second thing is, the campaign of the Alianza, was it run effectively? Right? Were the candidates doing the best they could to push the agenda of the president? I remember very well, in fairness to President Marcos, when he opened the campaign in Lawag, he was very strong talking about corruption, alleged anomalies of corruption, Farmali. He talked about West Philippine Sea, na kami ang Team Pilipinas, hindi kami tuta ng China. He talked about extrajudicial killing, etc. And then what happened? There was no follow-through whatsoever. So my point is, maybe he's over-reading into, I don't know, this meta-narrative na baka ang gusto ng tao is I'll just, fold over and just let the Duterte have their day. I think that's a wrong way of reading it. Maybe you should have more tactical understanding of what went wrong with your campaign. Maybe your campaign team did not do well. Maybe you didn't extract enough from your candidates. Maybe you didn't have the best combination of the candidates. After all, maybe some of them were towards retirement base rather than towards a re-energized campaign. So, yun ang concern ko dito, na I think President Marcos Jr., rather than looking at tactical factors that may have contributed to their underperformance, not total defeat in the midterm elections, what he's doing here right now is essentially he's getting the white flag out. And exactly, going back to what you said, if you want to go Machiavellian about it, I don't see either fox here nor lion. I see an owl here, maybe the owl of Minerva and wisdom and introspection, but he's still president, and he doesn't want to be a lame dog. But he is showing that he's worried that he's going to be a lame duck, and that's why he's doing all of these things. So again, I just don't think it was optimal. I am sure people will disagree with me. There were people inside government who disagreed with me, but I hope they understand where I'm coming from on this issue.
Well, it does seem that the actions in the past months were irreversible. I mean, in terms of restoring the relationship of the Marcoses and the Dutertes, but he failed to take the bull by the horns, as you mentioned. He failed to follow through on that. But what should we expect from this podcast? That's episode 1. What is that move all about? I mean, is this him trying to be more accessible, communicative? What is he trying to do here?
Well, I mean, from what I understand, without spilling too much beans, because I had some conversation with some folks, I think some people were hurt when I said that maybe ang dapat mag-resign yung mga people who did his strategy and communication. So maybe some people are hurt. I didn't mean it in that sense. I understand where they were coming from. I think they wanted to send this message, positive messaging. Well, it worked for BAM, it worked for Bongo, maybe it will work for us. I get it. But my point here is, yeah, I think the way forward is President Marcos should realize that just he was not in the battlefield of narrative building. As I mentioned a while ago, panalong panalo sila Bam and Kiko and basically the progressive in pushing a certain narrative of good governance. Panalong panalong mga Duterte camp in pushing this solidification of support after the ICC arrest of former President Duterte. So nagrallying around the flag effect sila. Bongo did best because he kind of had everything behind him, and that's why he did very well. So how should he respond? He's not gonna win this battle of narratives by withdrawing from it, nor is he gonna win it by one podcast episode with one person and then hoping that will be it. Okay, game over, okay na, palitan ko yung cabinet. No, I think this should be a beginning of a new series of communication strategies. And perhaps there has to be more podcasts, more spontaneous discussion, maybe podcasts with different kinds of people, maybe experts, maybe legitimate journalists like you, Gretchen, people who will ask him, well, not necessarily hostile question, but questions that will bring out the best in you. Kung saan magkakaroon siya ng oportunidad para i-explain sa ating taong bayan na okay, nakakulang kami sa first 2-3 years at ang dahilan dyan is daming hidwaan, I did my best, but sana sa mga susunod na mga taon, yung mga ibang kaibigan natin, even if they're critical, sana hindi sila mag-destabilize, sana hindi sila maging source of chaos and conflict, etc. Because let's not forget, the reason we have political polarization is not BBM, right? The reason we have political polarization is because the Duterte perhaps never accepted Marcos acting as a president. They thought he will just be the puppet. They thought he'll just be the front. And once Marcos acted like a president and pushed for his own prerogative, you have former President Duterte questioning him. You have all of these attacks on him, personal attacks on him as cocaine user, supposedly drug addict, attacks on his family. I mean, let's not forget the source of instability and chaos is not from President Marcos. He's the one who always trying to bring things down in terms of temperature. So I think the way forward is not only positive messaging, but also reminding people why we are having this situation. But nevertheless say, I will do my best to focus on the issues that matter to people, infrastructure, etc. Siguro he should focus in the coming years also on the issue of yung subsidized rice. Diba? Siguro hindi niya magawa na lahat ng mga bigas ay 20 peso kada kilo, but yung pilot project na ginawa nila sa Visayas, for instance, close to the election period, gawin nila across the country. So I think they can do both. You can combine positive messaging and sasabihin mo, ayoko naman ng away. At the same time, also defend yourself at sabihin mo, hindi naman ako yung pinanggalingan ng away na yan. And then at the same time, of course, do not signal weakness. Because, Gretchen, let's not forget, the trial may happen. But whether the trial will be a Mickey Mouse trial or a legit trial, it will depend on how the majority in the Senate are going to calculate this. And this is very, very important. If BBM thinks that the pinks, whether it's Risa, Bam, and Kiko, are going to carry the day, if BBM thinks, okay, outsource lang natin ito kay Leila de Lima and let Shell Jokno carry the day, and then maybe something good will happen, it's not going to work, right? They just don't have the numbers, right? So this really goes down to the centrist senators, including some who were part of his allianza, but now they're going to think about their own political interests. DT signal enough decisiveness and strength to convince the centrist senators that they should risk their own political capital, if not worse, by having the trial to begin with or having a legitimate trial. Because yes, I think it's quite hard to see if there's enough numbers to convict Sara Duterte, assuming there's a preponderance of evidence. But there could be enough senators who could be convinced to hold a robust enough trial that at least exposes the preponderance of evidence and alleged abuses. Because alam mo bakit, Gretchen, Sara may not get convicted, but she may end up so exposed by a legitimate trial that will render her politically no longer viable for a presidential round in the 2028. And that could still serve the interests of either the president or other critics of Duterte. So that's why it's important what he's signaling to the others. So I know his messaging was sa taong bayan, but guess who are the people who immediately released a statement in support of his reconciliation proposal? The very people who don't want the trial to happen or have been debating what's the meaning of forthwith 6 months na, diba?
So they don't want to decide, of course, or to take sides, right?
He has multiple audiences here. You cannot choose your audiences. And the centrist senators, people who don't want to risk any... they are watching President Marcos and saying, well, he's giving up the fight maybe. Why should I risk my neck here? And let's just get over with this.
Well, decisiveness and strength it is. He has asked his whole cabinet to resign. What do you make of this move? Is that common in the midterms to have a revamp like this of this scale? And does that show strength, in your opinion?
Again, I think that's an overcorrection. I mean, I think there are definitely certain people in his cabinet, or depending how you define cabinet, is Solicitor General a cabinet member? Like, why is the DOJ Secretary of Duterte still there, right? No offense to, with all due respect to Solicitor General Menardo Guevara, we clearly know that his position is contrary to the position of the president on key issues like the ICC arrest of former President Duterte. Why is he still there? So maybe it makes sense for some of these people to resign, right? Or no longer be in his cabinet. But I have talked to some of these cabinet members who are extremely competent people, whether it's in the Department of Energy, for instance, whether it's the Department of Foreign Affairs, for instance, my goodness, even Department of National Defense. I don't know, baka bibigyan niya na kay Sara finally yung DND na yan. Who knows, right? Anything is possible nowadays. But do you get what I'm saying? Like, I just felt this is a little bit overboard. But if this is the optics he wants to project and he feels that that will show decisiveness, so be it. Pero para sa akin, ang mahalaga dito is Department of Agriculture, because mahalaga yung issue of food security. If he feels that the Department of Agriculture is not being run competently, yes, go for a change. If he feels the Department of Finance did not do well on the field health issue or making sure that the budget is allocated proper to certain welfare project, maybe he should look at that. But I don't see any serious problem with other departments, whether it's DND, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Energy. I've met some of these people, whether it's, maybe NEDA, which is now, of course, National Development Department. They missed their targets. Is that because Secretary Balisacan is not competent enough, or because of other factors? So again, I think this is, I think, too performative in my opinion. Even though it makes sense for some of the cabinet members to indeed be reshuffled. Let's not forget the DOTR was just changed recently, so fresh in the work lang yung current Department of Transportation Secretary, and actually I think he's doing a fantastic job in terms of at least projecting leadership and decisiveness. Maybe he can also a thing or two.
Education Secretary is also new.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So again, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the president. The Italians always say, the fish rots from the head. So if you want to convince the people, you cannot just rely on spokesperson on your cabinet or article egos of the president. It's important for the president himself to shape the national narrative. Alam mo bakit mahalaga yan, Gretchen? Because we had 6 years of Rodrigo Duterte, who every night was doing istorya, right? That completely changed the dynamics of what people expect from a president. I have lost count of how many people I've talked to who said, na-miss namin yung mga araw na si Tatay Digong pinapakinggan namin. Kahit hindi kami nag-agree sa kanya, nakikita namin yung pagkatao niya, yung emotions niya, sobra kasing relatable si Digong. I would say Digong was perhaps the most effective rhetorician, maybe not the effective speaker, but rhetorician we have ever had in recent history. He could connect, and he would connect. He would give like talks every night almost during the pandemic, right? So coming from that, for Marcos, you're not going to win the day with just one podcast episode, which in my opinion was not actually the best one. I think he has to do more of that, maybe podcast with different people.
Richard,
or conversation people like you, for instance.
do you agree that this administration focus more on politics? Because as sinabi nga ni BBM, the people are tired, obviously, of politicking. Do you agree with that this administration focused on politics? I mean, taking a look at the happenings at the ICC, isn't that also something critical? I mean, when it comes to the conversation about social justice here in the Philippines, getting justice, what are your thoughts on that? And also, ano yung mga sticking points dito sa kanyang SONA na tingin mong kailangan ng ma-address in the immediate?
So yeah, I think basically what I've been arguing is that he's evading the fundamental issue, right? So sabi ko yung dalawang issue which really cost the Alianza, aside from maybe campaign weaknesses or composition of the Alianza, is that hindi nila sinagot yung dalawang malaking tanong, diba? Kasi kung sinasabi natin politika daw, what does it mean? There's an assumption na may abuso nangyari or may mga bagay na nangyari na parang sa tingin ng mga tao ay parang mali, right? So isa yung
the budget,
ayuda, yung budget, yung PhilHealth, yun ang kailangan niya explain. Mali ba yung nangyari? Tama ba yung nangyari? Ano ba nangyari dun sa mga pangako niya na magkaroon ng tapat na gobyerno at saka epektibo na gobyerno? At yung pangalawa, yung issue ng ICC. What was he hoping? That ilagay mo si Digong dyan and then suddenly people will just forget about Duterte and move on? Of course not. Duterte base is roughly 15 to 20%, and then it exploded to 40% in at least some of the surveys, because that means a lot of other people who are not hardcore Duterte supporters bought into this Duterte line na kinidnap si Digong, kinawawa si Digong, na walang basihan yung ginawa sa ICC. So I don't know how the cabinet reshuffle and saying reconciliation and all is gonna deal with the fundamental concern here, which is he did not answer bakit tama yung ginawa sa ICC. Bakit walang mali dun sa
There
budget
was no
nila.
strong statement or strong
Exactly. I
hand
think
in
he has to
that.
respond to those issues in his State of the Nation address. And now that he's going into his legacy years, he also has to go on the positive messaging and say, X, Y, Z, itong gagawin ko. At kung may mga bagong, sabihin natin, cabinet members na magagaling, emphasize niya anong gagawin nila sa mga susunod na taon para hindi lang siya hindi lame duck, he's going to be an effective president with a fundamental legacy.
And even bringing the 20 pesos a kilo rice does not seem sustainable to everyone. I mean, it is being distributed across different Kadiwa stores in certain parts of the country, but people don't believe it is actually a permanent solution. But speaking of legacy, on a final note, what do you think does BBM need to do in the next 3 years? How does he consolidate back his power, apart from the things that you mentioned, of course? But there is no clear successor in sight. How does he, strengthen his rank, his forces, heading into 2028? And how does he cement his legacy?
Well, I mean, he has multiple options, right? And none of those options are ideal, right? One option is stick to someone close to him who may not be as popular, right? We can talk about maybe Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, who's very close to him. Maybe he'll maintain his position as Speaker of the House, but based on the surveys, he may not be the most ideal candidate, at least for the presidency. The other option for him is to form a tactical alliance, let's say, with anti-Duterte forces from the pink or progressive opposition. But then again, there are going to be tensions and problems with that. It could split both ways. And again, it's not very ideal because, let's say, he supports the run of Riza Hontiveros or the run of Lenny or Pam. Nothing will stop these people from pushing for good governance and inevitably looking into alleged anomalies, not only under Marcos Jr. but also under Marcos Sr., right? And then so on and so forth, right? And then if you
How
cut
about the Tulfos? How about the Tulfos?
Exactly. So if you cut the deals with the Dutertes, like I think, what is he gonna do? Bring back Duterte from ICC? I mean, like what is he gonna offer them, right? To as recompense for that. And then absolutely you meant as you correctly mentioned, I think the fact that Erwin did not top this Senate race and that we don't have 3 Tulfos anymore strengthens the possibility that Rafi Tulfo will remain as one of the favorites. And as you correctly implied here, it looks like one of the options that President Marcos may have is to support an independent-minded and technically independent senator and candidate like Rafi Tulfo. That could be an option for him. But who will be Rafi Tulfo's vice president? Maybe Martin Romualdez? Maybe that could be an option. Or maybe someone from the progressive side plus Rafi Tulfo. That could be a combination. Unless, as I said, maybe he wants to put Sara back in the cabinet and then love. And then, sorry na lang kay Tatay Digong, he's there na in ICC. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, he has no easy options. Kaya the best thing he can do is accept that there were tactical errors, that he has communication gaps, and most importantly, tuloy-tuloy yung effort niya to prove to the Filipino people that he cares, he's willing to put in the work, and tell the story. You know, storytellers ang dapat mga politicians, especially president. Especially after Digong, we learned that the most powerful thing when it comes to president is the ability to shape the national narrative and to win hearts and minds of people. And Digong was a master of that. And that's why we're still living with his legacy, even if he's no longer in the Philippines for the foreseeable future.
Maybe you should apply as a communication strategist. Oh, good,
I was
good
putting you in
points right
trouble by
there.
saying maybe you should do the podcast interview with him and then let's see if you're good enough to be his communication strategist.
All right, maraming salamat sa iyo for your analysis, wonderful analysis as usual. We have Richard Heydarian, a resident political pundit, joining us on Morning Matters today.